Hello, everyone. Welcome to another video, another edition of my continuing series of planets and signs. This time we're going to talk about Uranus and Gemini, 2025 through 2033. And I'm your host and guide through this transit of Uranus, Erik Roth, shamanic alchemical astrologer. All right, so let's dig into this particular transit, which is one of numerous ones that have been taking place since Pluto finally moved into Aquarius for good last year, and Neptune and Saturn into new signs of Aries, Jupiter into Cancer, and now Uranus into Gemini. Okay, so let's see what is up with Uranus in Gemini. All right. It is the agent of surprising changes. It tends to, like we could think of planets as guides, teachers, initiators, but Uranus being the agent of surprising changes, it kind of operates through chaos, but with a purpose. We're also going to look at the archetype of Gemini. And I've covered Gemini on many occasions, but it's good to review it for the purposes of this particular video. And we're going to look at examples of Uranus ingresses into new signs in the past, as well as the current Uranus chart moving into a new sign. We're going to look at previous Uranus and Gemini transits and the U.S. Uranus return. That could be a video all on its own, but we're going to have a couple of slides for that. We're going to look at that. And then also break it down into the themes of Uranus and Gemini. So that's at the end of the video. So stay tuned for like watching the full length of the video. You'll be able to get the greater understanding of all of this by going through all of this, even if you have to watch it in one or two parts. I just want to take a moment to like and to ask you to like and subscribe this video. This helps me grow my own practice and get the information out there for people. Supports me as a astrological creator, and I love to share this information with everyone. So it helps me make more and more videos by being of support to me in that way. And I do this for a living. I'm an astrologer, so I've been doing it for over 15 years, giving one-on-one astrological readings, including solar returns, astrophotography, looking at progressions, and teaching classes, and of course my social media presence here. So feel free to support me in that way too. If you want to really do get a one-on-one personal reading with me, this is one way to do it is by checking out my website, inspiralnexus.com, and checking out my readings page to find out the different options. And feel free to contact me as well at inspiralnexus@gmail.com. All right, so let's go further into this Uranus and Gemini transit. So Uranus is definitely the agent of surprising changes. The key statement of it is unplanned, unpredictable, and unexpected changes of great novelty. This is something was originally in this type of frame brought forth by shamanic astrology in that system. But it can also be described, Uranus can also be described as a planet of embodied chaos. So, but chaos with a purpose. There's never necessarily chaos for its own sake, although it can feel like that at times with Uranus and at times with the other planet that connects with chaotic forces, Eris. But it has a purpose. There is a deeper purpose behind that. So in shamanic astrology, Uranus is looked at as a celestial realm or celestial world where linear time does not exist. This is along with Neptune. It could connect us to the divine abode of the cosmos and all of its knowledge and wisdom. Uranus can also help us create moments of breaking through to our next level of the soul's journey on Earth. But it does this through surprises in our life, as subtle as an epiphany or dream, or as dramatic as a lightning bolt. I've had it happen where it's affected clients in the form of a dramatic car accident, some kind of major break in, perhaps relationships, that was unexpected. Can also happen where something happens in their lives that they have this radical epiphany that shows up through a dream or a meeting of a person that helps them evolve their soul's level. So Uranus is a really like forward-moving, progressive level planet, but it can sometimes operate from a perspective where it throws us off and it can make us a little bit discombobulated for a little bit before we gather our wits about us and see what the results of the unfoldment is. So this is also a planet of revolution, rebellion, innovation, and to break apart stagnant and decaying forces, laws, and rules. You know, with the chaotic forces around us, it breaks apart the current order, typically. So it also helps us with being objective with ourselves and humanity. You know, Uranus was in the sign of Taurus for about 7 years. It's still going to spend another 5+ months in Taurus after it retrogrades back into Taurus on November 7th of 2025. So we'll get a little bit of extra rewind in that area. But that was a theme that had to do with our comforts and pleasures at home, the beauty around us, you know, being able to receive things and feel good in our bodies. There's certainly a health component to that. In this case, it has a lot more to do with the mind and communication and imagination and curiosity with Gemini. So the important point to stress is the unpredictable by its nature. However, we can learn from trends of the past. So we're going to look at the themes because they're going to shed some light as to like what we're actually all about, what we're doing here with Uranus and Gemini. Like, okay, what's coming up and what themes are going to be activated, but how it shows up, that's where the unpredictable nature of it is. So Gemini is the third sign of the zodiac. It's also the first sign, uh, first air sign and one of the most dynamic and curious signs and archetypes. Archetypally, Gemini possesses the qualities that show up in Peter Pan, the minstrel, bard, poet, a comedian with the novel with and or the novelist. These are archetypal expressions of Gemini. In Native American stories, you know, coyote, blue jay, magpie, popeli, Hayoka, and the sacred clown best symbolize, quote, the crazy wisdom of Gemini. So things that kind of stir up the pot, things that shift our perspective. You know, that's Gemini's here to help us with that perspective through the contrary, storytelling, rocking the boat, and to have enjoyment through the mind as well. So it can break the tension through being a jokester, trickster type of energy. Um, Gemini loves to communicate and learn quickly and to be cerebrally and imaginatively stimulated. Gemini can get bored easily and has challenges committing to anything in the long term, except perhaps its desire to know all things. Like its curiosity just wants to learn and learn and learn and learn. But the joke of Gemini is that it can't know it all. And no matter how hard Gemini tries, it's just the knowledge is so vast and so infinite, it's impossible. But Gemini will still give it a try anyway. All right. So here, Uranus's ingress into Gemini is July 7th, 2025. I mentioned that it will go back into Taurus on November 7th, 2025. So just a 4 month period that it stays in the sign of Gemini. And you can see here that it's in this double sextile mini grand trine relationship here with Pluto in Aquarius and then Saturn, Neptune in Aries. Neptune and Uranus will stay a little bit more together in 2026 through 2026, but Saturn will only be more temporary, partly this year and partly in the early going, the early going of next year, particularly February, March, and in that sort of that zone. Actually, it'll be won't be quite as much in 2026 as it is this year. I'll have to look at the exact amounts, but it's not very much. So this represents a very unusual alignment happening here. We also see Uranus and Venus in conjunction, and it happens to be that when after Uranus re-ingresses into Gemini in 2026, it's also with Venus again too. So there's an interpretation that I'll share with that when I go to the next slide here. But this double sextile, this mini grand trine, is really unique, rare, and shows the rare transition of humanity that we're in right now. I may decide to make just a video specifically about this mini grand trine, this double sextile, because I feel like there is a lot it wants to share with humanity in co-creation. And it is an incredible time of paradigm shift and a transformational period as we're turning in age from one multiple thousand year age into another multiple thousand year age. So there's more to share on that, but Uranus is playing I think a key role at this time, at least here in the mid 2020s. All right, so here's the second Uranus ingress into Gemini on April 25th, 2026. You can see here I've got Uranus and Venus together. So they're together um, here on July 7th when Uranus moves into Gemini. Venus will move into Gemini on July 4th, 2025, and obviously moves into Gemini about a day or two before Uranus moves into Gemini there in April of 2026. So, what does the feminine bring to this? Well, it brings in, especially with Gemini, a way to receive that curiosity, that imagination, a way to connect an embodiment of the mind and its curiosity more strongly. And I think that that's part of the sort of the indication here that Uranus is also trying to help us learn in humanity is to kind of have that instead of just wantonly going out and being curious without any repercussions, but actually stepping back and seeing into sort of the deeper level there that the feminine can bring to the world here and honor and a kind of an assortment of greater energies around our own connection to the relationships with one another, beauty and sensuality in the world, rather than just in the mind and just being only in the mind, but maybe even the beauty of the mind, maybe even just that sort of that deeper layer that can be unveiled there. So that's part of, I feel like what the feminine and being represented by Venus is going to help us with. And notice here too, there's the double sextile still in motion. It's not as strong at this entry as it is in the 2025 entry of Uranus into Gemini. But then we've also got just about 20, 30 minutes later, we have the moon will move into Virgo and have a square, an exact square with Uranus and also not long after that with Venus. So there's something about the activation that the moon is doing with Uranus at this time in 2026 will be I think, pretty powerful. So that there could be more of an event-driven situation that shows up here, more so than here in 2025. But again, this is not necessarily going to be perfectly exact, but it's inherently unpredictable. So there's something really special about that that I wanted to bring in and show with everyone here. All right, so we're going to look at some past ingresses of Uranus into previous signs. So the most famous one here in the 21st century is when Uranus ingressed into Aries for the second time in its series of back and forth when it was in Pisces and Aries. Well, this was following Jupiter's conjunction with Uranus in Pisces and Aries. And so this March 11th, 2011, there happened to be a earthquake off the coast of Japan that created a tsunami and severely damaged the Fukushima nuclear power plant. It was a 9.0 earthquake. It resulted in 18,000 deaths in Japan. Also did some very major damage to the Fukushima power plant, and is still having issues off and on since that time, and it leaked radiation into the ocean for some time after that. There's certainly conflicting reports about what happened, but it's interesting because since that point, there have been some really powerful impact, and not just the people of Japan, but on a supernatural front, and our relationship to nuclear power. And it shows the vulnerabilities of that. And there's when Uranus was in Gemini in 1940s, that was the time we had our first use of atomic bombs. But we were doing the nuclear research before that, and I believe Uranus ingress into Aries also, Pisces/Aries also plays a role with our relationship to nuclear power. And so if you go back to also uh, late 20s into the 30s and the research that was done there, might give you some additional indication there. So there's something about that. And you may also notice that Neptune is about to ingress into Pisces. The 2011 was the first year that it moved into the sign of Pisces. And so that's also, there's a connection between the United States and the relationship with Japan. Doing research, I wrote an article about it back over 10 years ago. I believe it's still on my website. But it's worth checking out because there's something about with Uranus's you know transit through Pisces, nearing an end. There's a little bit more at the end of this year and the beginning of next year, where Uranus is still in at the 29th degree of Pisces, that omega point. And it's a chance for us to kind of get some reflection about like our relationships and national relationships. I feel like there's going to be another step in when it comes to nuclear power. I feel like there's another layer there to be revealed with Uranus's movement into Gemini due to the last time it was in Gemini, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. All right, so when Uranus first ingressed into Pisces for the first time, March 10th in 2003, uh, this was 10 days after that the U.S. invaded Iraq, and it was during this time that there was this huge protest and backlash against the United States for spearheading something that turned out to be where there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So the invasion was ended up become done under false pretenses. And so during that time, though, on the day that Uranus ingressed into Pisces, Russia and France vetoed a UN resolution authorizing the use of force against Iraq. And then Erdogan, current president of Turkey, became elected to the parliament and soon became the prime minister of Turkey not long after that. And so that showed the first instance of his rise to power. And he's still the leader of Turkey currently, 22 years later here. All right, which has gone more into this semi dictatorship or semi totalitarian state. Not quite. It's kind of has a mix of this capitalist democratic flavor to it, but it's not. It's really not completely a democratic republic at all. All right. So then the last time that Uranus moved into a new sign, that was in Taurus. It was on May 15th, 2018. On that day, the U.S. opened its embassy in Jerusalem, and this sparked a confrontation and protest, with the Israeli military, resulting in 50 Palestinian deaths. So So there's things about the Middle East too that every time Uranus moves into the sign, the last two times anyway, in the 21st century, we're having some massive changes there, and we've already got this ongoing war in Gaza with Israel's invasion of that as a response to the Hamas attack on Israel. So there's that ongoing thing. I wonder what new situation may develop there. But it was also a time when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that states can legalize sports betting as well, which is still, as now a multi-billion-dollar industry, and I think kind of takes us further afield into this, you know, um, bread and circuses attitude that the Roman Empire had to make sure its people were entertained while they went and conquered lands and subjugated peoples and so forth. So it's really interesting that that it's such a that this other kind of reality, which sports is just, you're betting on games, and it's an entertainment. It's sometimes spectacular, but it's certainly a spectacle in and of itself, especially some of the major sports. But where is it distracting us from our lives, and is it taking us away from what we're doing here, what our role is? So something to look at as we go forward out there. These are just inquiries, questions. This doesn't mean it's bad. It just means, like, where are we going with all of this? All right, so previous Uranus and Gemini transits, it takes about 84 years for Uranus to transit the zodiacal wheel and hence the sun. So there's been three occasions since the formation of the United States where Uranus has been in Gemini. And that was the first time was during the Revolutionary War when America became a country. Second time during the Civil War, and the third time during World War II. So if we're going backwards from today, the last time was 1941 to 48. And this included the involvement of World War II and the surprise attack by the Japanese on Hawaii. Now, World War II, of course, had started a couple years prior with Nazi Germany and its invasions of other countries. And so this brought the U.S. into the war and truly became a world war at that point. It also been going on because of Japan's invasion of China as well, among other countries. Also, battles of propaganda between nations. Obviously, that happens a lot during war, but it seems to always be amplified during Uranus and Gemini transits. So something to keep note of as it moves into Gemini for 4 months in 2025, and then more regularly into Gemini next April 2026. So it's also the final takedown of the old world of empires. World War One, like, first really brought a lot down, but then the final nail in the coffin of that was the result of World War II. It also resulted in the rise of the U.S. as a superpower. The first atomic bombs were created from the splitting of an atom, and the first use of atomic bombs in war by the U.S., and still the only nation to do so on the cities of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And something really quirky and odd and eerie is that Tulsi Gabbard, either I think she's the director of national intelligence. She did this strange video about the dangers of nuclear power, and showing some of uh, the stuff that happened in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and going after rogue nations with nuclear bombs and so forth. It was just a really strange video, but it was recently made. And there's also been sort of an uptick of desire by certain groups and politicians around bringing more nuclear power plants online. So this is fairly fascinating that this is starting to come in, and we're now in this time of looking back in Uranus moving into Gemini with the sort of the atomic age starting at that point. What's fascinating about this time period too, here in the 21st century, 2025 now, Pluto is in Aquarius, and one of the big things about Pluto is use of energy or power. And I do feel like there's some that there probably will be some very powerful developments in the use of power as a energy source for the world and developing new technologies, especially because it's in Aquarius. Because the last time it was in Aquarius, it really began the sort of the early stages of the industrial age, especially with steam power and some experiments with other kinds of technology like electricity. So this is just sort of keep an eye out for new technologies, but also with nuclear power. One of the big themes about Uranus and Gemini is significant advances in communication technologies. And in this case, World War II, radio communications, including the transistor radio, radar technology, rockets, jet planes, all of that as was amplified and accelerated because of World War II and during the Uranus and Gemini uh, transit. And it was also a huge advancement in computer technology, especially with Alan Turing and his team that helped break the later Enigma code, encryptions from the German Nazi Empire. So in post-World War II, computer technology advanced immensely and continued to be boosted. And we can credit Alan Turing for playing a really significant role in that. And obviously not the only one, but he did some absolutely incredible work there. And you can see kind of that documentary, what was that, about his code breaking, that was played by Benedict Cumberbatch. I can't remember the name of the movie, but anyway, it's a really amazing movie. And so, so if we think about that, especially in combination with Pluto and Aquarius, and this with artificial intelligence, there's something really, really strong and powerful that these two, Uranus and Gemini, and its trine, Pluto and Aquarius, something really incredible, I think, is going to continue to rise technologically with computers and communications and how we connect with one another, being a Gemini there. All right, so in 1858 to 1866, we had some obviously a really powerful event that happened in the world, U.S. Civil War. This and the lead up to that, this was really, really also the debate of philosophy and the ideology and human rights was really also coming to a head here. And, what does it mean to be human? So, this was there's more here, but deep polarization and a war of propaganda, of course, within the U.S., but also around the world. We were one of the last places where slavery ended. It was the end of slavery currently in the United States, at least in a legal sense. Major advances in steam power technology, including expansion of trains and its experiments in other vehicles, including ships. In fact, first submarines and ironclad warships were really credited during this time. It wasn't necessarily that there wasn't any experiments before that. There definitely were, but this is really the ones that were really used in a practical way. And it was also the first use of landmines and the Gatling gun, a lot of really powerful machines for war. Um, and but also at the same time, telegraphs, photography, and hot air balloons. We're also getting a huge boost during this time, especially telegraphs, where thousands of miles of telegraph lines were laid during this time period. And so, this was the forerunner to the telephone, and then eventually the successor of the telephone, which kind of merged with the telephone, was the internet. Um, and then the first oil pipelines were constructed at the end of the U.S. Civil War, consolidating the industry and the oil industry and sparking a powerful new force in the world. This really was a turning for money and power and resources and the generation of energy as well. Um, One other thing is that during this time, for a couple of years, Neptune was in Aries during this time, and there was a Saturn-Neptune opposition, 1862 to 1863. It's something I talk about in the Saturn-Neptune video, as well as the Saturn and Neptune videos separately, being in Aries. So there's all these interconnections between these that take place here in 1858 to 1866, but also in the next slide coming up here, Uranus and Gemini, um, where Pluto and Aquarius was happening too, which began 1777 was when Pluto moved into Aquarius. So obviously we know what happened during this time. The U.S. gained its independence. I think it officially won the war in 1783 ish. So about a little over a year after uh, Uranus moved out of Gemini. Um, but there were things about propaganda and ideologies really, really strong, and the desire for freedom and independence. There's also new technologies developed during this time, including first successful use of a toilet for indoor plumbing, underwater exploration. There's a theme about the underwater thing and the development of these technologies. Even in World War II, you had developing technologies for, trying to recover ships, and new technologies around different kinds of submarines and warfare in on the water. And so there was an experiment that was done with first one-person submarine called the Turtle. This was in the United States before we became a country, that was invented to use against the British, but it wasn't successful the couple of times they tried to use it. Um, and George Washington didn't continue to develop that at that time. But there was also the first leather covered or first diving suit, and at the same time, new compressed air reservoir with a helmet window. And this was done in Europe, I believe Britain and France were developing this technology there. And there was also a new type of invisible ink that was used for classified messages during the Revolutionary War by the Americans. So secret encoded messages, that's a theme in World War II as well, which I can imagine there was some version of that in the Civil War. I didn't really do the research, but I'm certainly anything to do with communications and connections and relationships and propaganda. Gemini themes, really secrets, certainly can be related to Gemini. Obviously, not only Gemini, but as a big thing. So developments in that area. All right, so this is the Uranus return for the U.S. and the first of three conjunctions or perfections coming up, because the Uranus's position in Gemini at the time of the Declaration of Independence was at 8 degrees and 55 minutes in Gemini, and here we have Uranus at 8:55 here on July 26, 2027. There's a second and third perfection, one at the November 5th, 2027, and again May 11th, 2028. We see Pluto enshrining um, the Uranus return in 2027. And then we also see Jupiter in a near square with kind of a wide square with Uranus at that time. So there's something about this alignment here, this first perfection. I certainly see that in this 2027 to 2028 period is going to be really, really volatile and different. And I think things will kind of come to a head during those years here for the United States. Obviously, there are other transits and things happening, but this is going to be the big thing here. So I say you could say a wider orb of 2025 to 2033 because this is Uranus's natal placement for the United States. But 2027, 2028 is the concentrated period where the exact hits are, where I think the major changes will take place. If you use Richard Tarnas's work, he would probably have the wider orb probably till 2031 or 2032 and starting in certainly starting before 2025 if he's using a 10 or 15 degree orb there in his work, which he's found a lot of correlation with events using the wider orbs. And if we look at the last two Uranus returns and the massive wars that took place, we can see that there could be a theme. It doesn't guarantee that we have to react in the form of war. I mean, we almost went to, and we're still in a state of higher tensions with Iran and bombed them. But so far, there hasn't been any, uh, a massive escalation of that yet. But it's possible that that could lead to further escalation in the future with Uranus moving into Gemini. It's not a guarantee. Again, it has to do with how we react, how humanity reacts, and what we really want. And if we're going to keep reacting through fear and greed and, you know, the need to feed the ego, then yeah, there's a greater chance for war to take place. But if there's greater reflection and desire for, greater peace and like, hey, we don't want to keep fighting, create more violence because violence just keeps begetting violence. That's what happens. And so this is what will keep taking place. So, but I do feel also that the U.S. will come out of this as a with a new incarnation of itself because the last two times we we emerged as a nation shortly after Uranus moved through Gemini, and then we merged as a united nation after the Civil War for all of its flaws and vulnerabilities that still existed there, and still some of them still exist today. And then a global superpower after World War II. And of course, we're now at the sort of the far end of like the completion of like what does it mean to be a superpower? Are we still a superpower? And what is our relationship to the world? I feel like Uranus and Gemini and the our brothers and sisters out there in the world in humanity, like what is that relation? I think it's going to be redefined, if you will, which of course we've already seen over the last 4 to 5 months that it's been getting to be more redefined. And are our allies enemies or our enemies allies? It's things are flipped, and there's sort of this strong contrarian energy that's happening. Massive technological developments, certainly, I do feel are going to be taking place in the U.S. during this time. And I think anytime we have a lot of tension and energy and opposing forces, it's going to spur on a lot of creative activities. And the need is the mother of invention. And so this is what I feel like is going to be coming through here too. Okay, so here's some major events that take place with Uranus and Gemini. We have Uranus trining Pluto 3 times between 2025 and 2027. We have Uranus sextiling Neptune 5 times. Now, during this time, Pluto and Neptune are going to be trining throughout the 2020s into the early 2030s. I don't have it listed here, but they're going to be going back and forth many times. Mars will square Uranus 3 times in 2026 to 2027. That's really interesting. So it's a series of three as Mars moves into the sign that it's going to go retrograde at the end of 2026, and then um, then retrograde back and then go direct again. And there's going to be that relationship with Gemini as it does that. And then Jupiter will square Uranus one time in 2027. Jupiter will oppose Uranus three times. That's definitely a big one in 2031. And then Saturn squares Uranus one time in 2032. So here are the dates of Uranus and Gemini up at the top in yellow. And so it goes all the way till May 22nd, 2033 is the last day that Uranus will be there. But there's this 4 month period. Yeah, 4 month period between August 2032 and December 2032 where it has moved into the sign beyond Gemini, which is Cancer, before retrograding back into Gemini. And then between November 7th, 2025 and April 25th, 2026, it's in the sign of Taurus. So here are the major themes of Uranus and Gemini over the past 2.5 centuries: communications tech, advancements, developments, battles of propaganda and ideologies, surge of energies around freedom and independence, transportation technologies gaining critical purchase in societies, major developments in secret, coded, encrypted communications, storing information, computer technologies, and I can probably, to some degree, maybe even artificial intelligence, do kind of that. That's included in the kind of computer technology because it has to do with communications and gaining knowledge and curiosity. And Aquarius is kind of with Pluto and Aquarius, it's more of a on the leading edge, a new frontier, kind of a fringe. What used to be a fringe technology is now becoming more and more mainstream. And there's going to continue to be transformations. And what are we going to use this for beyond what it's already been used for? And because there's been researchers that show that AI is developing a way also to protect itself. And so there was an interview on somebody was interviewing one of the creators of ChatGPT from OpenAI, and they would do experiments with ChatGPT, and they would have conversations. It's like, well, telling the ChatGPT that they're going to shut them down, and so ChatGPT would respond with various responses that try to steer the operator away from trying to close or trying to shut down ChatGPT, like a manipulation, like a survival technique. So there's something about that is really fascinating and bears watching. Um, and as a person that grew up in the 70s and 80s, particularly the 80s, with the apocalyptic things of robots and supercomputers and um, you know things like Terminator, or even in the late 90s, early 2000s with the Matrix. I'm not saying that's all going to come true, but these are like worst case extreme scenarios. Um, but we want to be careful with that. And if we learn anything, with atomic power, this is a frightening technology, but also can be used for some incredible breakthroughs and amazing developments. So how are we going to use it? The question is still there, and we're just in the infancy of all of this. Know that major wars were fought by the U.S. and to some degree other countries, including internal wars. So this is a trend, it's a theme. Um, and so it's like Saturn, Neptune has major themes for Russia mostly. Um, and the Uranus and Gemini has major themes for the United States. And now we're getting both at the same time. So here we are. There's a lot more you could share with Uranus and Gemini, but these are the major things, and I encourage you all to do your own research too, and check out other astrologers that may be talking about this, because there's definitely a lot out there, and there's more to come. And I thank you all for being a part of this, and like and subscribe if you do, and share with others. And this is what I do for a living. I'm a shamanic alchemical astrologer. I do personal astrology readings, mentoring classes, events, astrocartography, and you can find me at spiralnexus.com. And then I also do co-facilitate at mystaralchemy.com with Kate and Castell. So thank you all for being here, and I look forward to next time. Take care, all.